All right. Well, welcome and thank you very much for not only requesting this session, but for joining us today. We are the Railway 200 team, and we're here today to take you on a tour, a virtual guided tour of inspiration. As you can see on your screen now, this is our unique touring exhibition train, whilst it was in Scotland last month. This photograph was taken by Scotland's Air Operations helicopter whilst it was travelling along the Fife Coast. And I have to say, I think it's a beautiful image. The colours are really quite beautiful. For information, Inspiration is currently at the West Somerset Railway, that's a heritage railway, and before Christmas it will visit Southampton, Paddington and Victoria, so it's busy in the run-up to Christmas. Okay, so today's tour, before we talk you through how the guided tour is going to work, I'd like to introduce you to the team. I'm Emma, I'm the programme manager. That means I oversee all of the campaign activity, and I've been involved in the celebrations and the planning of the celebrations since January 2022. I'm joined by Chantel. She looks after the commercial partnerships, and her role today is driving the virtual tour. So fingers crossed for Chantel's tech. We're also joined by Martin. He was responsible actually for commissioning and creating the virtual tour, along with our digital guide, which is available on Bloomberg's Connect app. And when he's not doing this, he has built our website as well. So he is our digital guru. And finally, I am delighted to introduce you to Mike Lamport. Mike is a retired railwayman and can trace his railway family history back to 1846. He's worked tirelessly this year promoting and supporting Railway 200 events, and he's here today to add some local history to that conversation. So that is your team here today. Does everyone want to say hello? I don't know if you can see people's faces pop up. Brilliant. Before we start the tour, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit more about Railway 200 and what inspiration is and how it was created. We felt that this was adding extra to what you would get if you went to see the train, because we're all about adding some value to the group. And when we start the tour, we'll be spending most of the time in Railway Firsts, where we'll be learning about the 200-year story of the railway and how it shaped and impacted national life. And once we've visited all four carriages, there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. I'd just like to also be clear that this is our first virtual guided tour like this, so please bear with us. We have practiced, we are ready to go, but just bear with us as we navigate this for the first time, if that's okay. So, Railway 200 has been a year-long series of events and activities to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the modern railway. This year we estimate over 5,000 events and activities reaching millions of people. We started the year off with the biggest heritage railway mass participation event ever. That was a lot of trains blowing a lot of horns and whistles across the country and overseas. There was the SNDR 200 Festival up in the northeast that ran for 9 months, and over the anniversary weekend over 100,000 people came, including Prince Edward, who I had the pleasure of meeting. We've run a charity partnership raising £200,000 for railway charities. And there was the Greatest Gathering, which was the largest ever rail festival over 3 days in Derby. We've had coins, stamps, books, plaques, floral displays, and one of my personal favourites is a steam engine you can see there in one of the pictures in the shape of a steam engine. So a really good jam-packed year full of activities and events that sort of raised the profile of rail and built some positivity and great conversations and stories around it. So that's a little bit about Railway 200. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about inspiration to get you all warmed up. In addition to all those events that our partners have been running across the country, as a team, we created Inspiration. This is a touring exhibition train that showcases 200 years of railway innovations, combining past, present and future milestones with hands-on activities and career-focused activities. Although it's designed for all ages to enjoy, the main objective is really to get more young people interested in and knowledgeable about railway careers. We launched it in June this year in Paddington, and it's currently touring England, Scotland and Wales, and will visit up to 60 locations over the course of the year. So these are my favourite bits, actually, when as a team we can reflect. These photographs show the outside of Inspiration is in its original state following its transformation. The carriages originally were built in Derby in 1975. They're Mark III rolling stock for those train enthusiasts out there. And we believe they were last operated by Greater Anglia. The original livery, that's the external design, was removed as we started the process. The carriages were then painted grey before the livery that we had designed was applied, which you can see in one of those pictures there with the word present. We wanted to keep the design impactful, and so we went with the words past, present, future, and together emblazoned across the coaches, as you saw or heard about on the first slide. And it ties into what's inside the carriages. So the word past is made up of images highlighting key moments in the Railway 200 story. The word present is made up of people's memories of journeys they've taken today. And the word future is in a type of reflective material, so people can see a reflection of themselves. And that's all about inspiring the younger people to see themselves in the future of the railways. And then the word together on the final carriage is made up of railway elements, so tunnels and signals and track and people. The bottom corner, you can see a great big beautifully red logo. We have two of those, one at the front and one at the back. They're painted in the Railway 200 red, and they feature the Railway 200 logo, and they are Class 66s. One was dedicated to Michael Portillo, and the other is named after Karen Harrison, who was the first female train driver, and her story is also featured inside the carriages. So the inside of the carriages, again, 4 pictures on the screen there showing the transformation of the interiors. The first image in the top left shows what they were like originally. So you can see all of the tables and chairs as they were. Then the transformation happened, with those were then removed, and then all of the panelling stripped back so the engineers could look at what was behind that and sort out all the electrics and all the new power that needed to go in to power the exhibition. And the final image shows some of the modular panelling to create the exhibition going into the coaches. So you can see that they've really had a serious amount of work done on these to create what you will now see on the next slide. When you start any designs, you have concept designs. That's when the designers get all very excited and draw lots of pretty pictures. Someone likened it to me to an architect. They have all the grand ideas and what it will all look like. And then it's the job of the sort of technical designers and engineers to actually make it happen. So what I've done here is I've pulled out some of the concept designs and then put alongside it the photographs of what actually we managed to create. And you can see there that the designers did and the engineers did a pretty good job of faithfully recreating that. There was a lot of challenges, as you can imagine, particularly with the choices of materials. Everything had to be rail grade. It was a train operating on the network, no passengers travel inside, but it still had to operate safely. So there was lots of considerations with how it was designed and what materials we used. The top image shows a big blue disc that's with the word Dorothy written across. That is a cutter head of an HS2 tunnel boring machine. And when you press a button on it, it lights up and makes the sound of the cutter head in action. And below you can see an image of a freight manager display. This is in the Careers carriage. And alongside that, you can see a smaller model of a cutter head from Dorothy. And when you press the buttons on that, each component part lights up and moves to illustrate how it all works together. Okay, So that's a little bit about Railway 200 and a little bit of how inspiration came to light, and what it looked like and what it looks like now. So this really is the start of your tour. We will start in Railway Firsts. That's the carriage with the word past written along the side of it. And this content takes you through the 200-year history, and we have 7 themes which are inside the carriage. The journey to 1825, then we look at stories around culture, scale, time, safety, work, and lifestyle. And across those 7 themes, over 30 individual stories have been curated. For today's session, we will stop on each theme and watch a short video from the curator of the exhibition, Rob Scargill. It's important to note that the Railway Museum work with us on this. They do exhibitions, we don't. So it was vital to have their input and their experience in creating this travelling train. And once we've watched the video, Mike here will come in and add some local storytelling to the theme, making it relevant for your area. And then once we've done that, we will then move on to the next theme. Does anyone have any questions? Does that all make sense? Excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing now because I'm handing over the control to Chantel, who's going to drive the virtual tour. So I'm going to stop sharing, which I hope's happened.
Yes, it has, Emma. And now I'm going to start sharing. Share with audio. Can I just confirm that everyone can see the tour screen?
Yep, amazing. Thanks, Chantel. What you're seeing here now is what when you step on board the past carriage, we welcome you in to Railway First. So Chantel's just going to move the screen around so you can start to see this is the vestibule area. And as you click on the little dots on the ground, it then travels you through to the exhibition. So we're now entering Railway Firsts, and we're now going to play a short video to set the scene.
Hello and welcome to the Railway First carriage as part of the Railway 200 exhibition train. I'm Rob Scargill, I'm the curator of this carriage, the Railway First carriage, and this is where we talk about the past, the history of the railways. And the first thing that we've got to answer is what actually happened on the 27th of September 1825? Well, quite a lot, but before we answer that, what happened before that then led to the moment that we're here to celebrate? So first of all, we look at the railways of the past, and the first ever sort of rudimentary railway that we know of took place in circa 600 BC in ancient Greece, where we had the Diolkos, where they transported warships over a limestone trackway. Now, if you take the kind of idea, the concept of a railway as a vehicle that can't move from a guided piece of track, this can be considered the world's first railway. And then we move on to the first railway in Britain, which was in 1566, where German copper miners came over and they mined copper in the Lake District. We then moved to Scotland's first wagonway or railway. So wagonway is just an early railway. It's uses wooden track and uses horses. Scotland's first wagonway then opened in 1722, and it transported coal. And you'll hear that an awful lot. A lot of railways transported coal. It was the thing that transformed the UK economy, made London kind of the central power of the economic world. We then move on to 1804, where we've got the first steam-hauled journey on a railway. That was in South Wales, in Merthyr Tydfil. And then in 1807, still staying in South Wales, we've got the first ever passenger railways, where they had passenger services running from Swansea to Mumbles, which is nearby on the coast there. But importantly, it didn't use steam locomotives. So what happened on the 27th of September 1825? Everything got brought together. For the first time, you had a journey where you had, on the Stockton and Darlington Railway, on the 27th of September, you had a steam-hauled journey with fare-paying passengers on a public railway, therefore the first modern railway journey and the birth of the modern railway as we know it.
And what you can see there, what Rob was using there was actual proper signal control panel that we repurposed and popped into the train. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Emma. Yes, of course, Surrey was ahead of the game here. You're one of the counties that Rob didn't mention there, but again, you were ahead of the game. You had the Surrey Iron Railway. Now, it was called railway because they didn't know what else to call these things in those days. And it ran from Croydon through to where the River Wandle met the Thames at Wandsworth. And it was freight only. And the interesting thing about it is that it wasn't a railway in the true sense of the word, but it was a plateway. So 9 miles long, a plateway is where we get the term for people who work on the track as plate layers. But in fact, it wasn't a railway as we know it with sleepers and rails. It was actually cast iron plates laid down with rails on either side to stop the wagons wandering off the plateway. And obviously to provide a safe walking route for the horses. So they didn't have to, they weren't up to their ankles in mud, as was the norm in those days. So the Surrey Iron Railway opened in 1803 and closed when obviously overtaken by what we now call the big railways, the London and South Western Railway and Co. in 1846. So your first railway, your first proper railway, was the South Western Railway line, which opened from Nine Elms, just on the river bank, on the Surrey River bank. Well, if one knows the area now, because that's where the United States of America's embassy now is. But that's the Nine Elms area, right by the Thames, on the Surrey bank of the Thames. And it ran through to Woking Common. And that's an interesting place to stop, because at that time there was no Woking as we know it. There was Old Woking as a community, but there was no Woking as we know it. It stopped at Woking Common, and it stopped there because it was on the Guildford to Chertsey Road, which was a major artery for Surrey in those days. And that opened in May 1838. And that was later extended on to a place they used to call Shapley Heath, which we now call Winchfield, in September of 1838, and finally on to Basingstoke in June 1839. And while we're in the area, we mustn't forget Guildford, of course, where a lot of us know and are from. The line from Woking Common to Guildford was extended to Guildford in 1845, and then eventually on to Portsmouth on the Portsmouth Direct Line in 1859. On the other side of the county, lines were opening to Croydon in 1841, to Sutton in 1847, and to Epsom in 1859, the same as the Portsmouth Direct Line. So that was at the time of railway mania, when there were all sorts of schemes coming up for lines for all sorts of places. About 1 in 3 actually got built in certain areas. In other areas, it was even a larger quantum that didn't get built. But Surrey was in at the beginning, and of course it actually was ahead of even the Great Western Railway. So well done to Surrey and the South Western Railway. Thank you, Emma.
Great. Are we okay to move on now, Chantal?
Yes, we are.
Amazing. Okay, the next stop on our tour will be the theme culture. And I'm now going to let Rob tell you a little bit more about that.
We're moving then to the second part of the Railway First Carriage. And in this space, this is the majority of the exhibition. We look at rail's influence beyond just moving people and goods, the influence on our lives that it's had today. So we start then with our first theme, which is culture. And we have, for example, the first railway photograph from 1845. This was taken at Linlithgow Station by the Scottish pioneering photography studio Hill and Adamson. And it was taken in 1845 at a time where photography was being developed at the same time as the railways. And it really shows kind of two technologies being developed sort of together. We've then got the first ever illustration of a rail vehicle here. This was written in a Latin book by a scholar called Georgius Agricola in 1556. And then this is one of my favourite objects in the whole of the exhibition. This is a replica of something that we have in the National Railway Museum archive of the first drawing of a train by a child. And we can see the drawing there at the top. That was drawn depicting the Stockton and Darlington Railway, the opening of it on the 27th of September 1825. We also look at things like how rail has influenced our fiction. And these are all kind of 20th century examples of stories that we know and love that feature the railways, and there's kind of a feeling of Britishness in those. And then also our language. So we use language all the time, like whistle stop tour or light at the end of the tunnel or I've been sidetracked. And those are things that are taken from the railway, initially used by railway workers and then adopted by the general public.
Great. Mike?
No particular Surrey angle in there, so we can move on. I think there's more to come later.
Yeah, I think what I found really interesting is the use of the language and how it's crept in. I often find myself on lots of meetings saying, right, yes, we'll keep this on track. And it's a bit of an in joke when you get on the railways, you sort of keep dropping all of these words in. Okay, great. So let's move on to scale now.
The final theme then that we're looking at in the Railway First Carriage is all about scale. And this is basically just to show railways equals big infrastructure. So we started with this brilliant thing. This depicts a tunnel boring machine used on the HS2 project. All the tunnel boring machines used on the HS2 project are all named after inspiring women. This particular one, which did the first HS2 breakthrough at Lord Itchington Wood, it's named after Dorothy Hodgkin, who won the first women's prize, was the first woman, sorry, to win a Nobel Prize for Science, the first British woman to do that. And yes, so I'll just press that button there. We then move on to the Channel Tunnel, so it's nice and loud now. So move on to the Channel Tunnel, and this was kind of a really significant moment in engineering. This is, you know, one of the greatest engineering achievements the world has ever seen, to build a land link between Britain and continental Europe. It was it opened in 1994, but the first time that two people shook hands, because the French tunnellers dug from one side and the British tunnellers dug from another, was on the 1st December 1990, and it was Graham Fagg and Philippe Cazette. And you can see them here in this film. They eventually swap flags over, and the British get champagne, the French get a stuffed toy of Paddington Bear as a thank you for everything that they've achieved. Funnily enough, though, the Channel Tunnel, though it opened in the 1990s, the first time it was ever conceived was in 1751, and the first time they actually attempted to construct it was in 1880. And believe it or not, it wasn't engineering limitations that led to it not being built. It was actually politics. There was a fear of invasion, and after digging a few kilometres in Abbott's Cliff at Dover, they actually stopped the project for fear of invasion. We've also got the first major railway bridge. This is here in County Durham, so we're filming today in Shildon, and where we are in County Durham, you've got the world's oldest surviving single arch railway bridge. It was built 99 years before the Stockton and Darlington opened, so it was built in 1726, and it's an amazing Grade 1 listed structure. The architect who built it, he actually didn't think that it would last, and for fear of that, he actually committed suicide by jumping off the bridge. So it is said. This isn't proven, but so it is said he committed suicide by jumping off the bridge, and it still stands today. And then the last story that we've got, bringing it right up to the present, is we've got the first direct train from China to Britain from 2017. Now, this is incredible because it goes through so many different countries. It goes from eastern China, so all the way from Yiwu to Barking in London. It's this incredible journey. It goes through 7 countries, took 18 days, it's 7,500 miles, and it took goods. And wouldn't it be amazing, you know, if we could get a direct passenger train across there? So all up for grabs in the future. And that's it then, 200 years of railway history sorted into one small carriage with 30 stories jam-packed in. You know, we not only want to celebrate the Stockton and Darlington Railway, which opened on the 27th of September 1825, a magnificent achievement, but frankly the reason that that's so important is everything that the railways achieved beyond that. And I think this is testament to the exceptional impact that the railways have had on all of our lives today.
Don't worry, that's not the end. It's just the order that we're traversing the carriage is slightly different to how Rob went down one side and went up the other. But for the purposes of our tour, we're going side to side, so we don't have to keep going backwards and forwards. Mike?
Yeah, just to build on there, Emma, fear of invasion. Of course, the railway has always been a political tool right from the outset. It's always gets kicked around by politicians or used by politicians. But back in Victorian times, you may have wondered, well, if the railway opened to Woking in 1838 and to Guildford in 1845, why the hell did it take until 1859 to get all the way down to Portsmouth, where the fleet was? You'd have thought that would have been quite an important place to get to. Strategically, Portsmouth was the place to be. But the Navy, with its fear of invasion, didn't want to let the railway through the walls of Portsea Island. So initially, the poor old railway had to contend with running along the south coast and not getting through onto the island, and eventually what we now know as Portsmouth and Southsea and Portsmouth Harbour. But of course, they did break through eventually, but that was the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway. And there still wasn't a direct route from London. The London, Brighton and South Coast Railway wandered around through Sussex to eventually get to Havant and Portsmouth. And a very clever Victorian railway engineer by the name of Thomas Brassey decided, as a speculation, to build the railway from Godalming to Havant. And he built it and he tried to sell it and nobody wanted it. And it sat for a year doing absolutely nothing. And then he had a clever idea. So what he did, in a quiet corner of Surrey, he built an embankment linking one railway to his railway. And that was very clever because, and it's still there, you can see it here today in the meadows at Shelford. There's a line of earth, an embankment with trees on it, which curves round from the Shelford direction just before the River Wey, and then connects in the Peasmarsh area to the Portsmouth main line. And cleverly, Brassey talked to the South Eastern Railway and said to them, would you like to go to Portsmouth? Because I've built a direct line to my direct line and you can go to Portsmouth. And of course, the South Western Railway thought, oh, no, you're not. We're not having the South Eastern Railway coming to Portsmouth. So they reluctantly bought the railway as a speculation and then reluctantly opened it in 1859. But they never ran fast services on it right for almost half a century because it was a buy they didn't want to make. But in fact, now, of course, it is one of the premier routes in the south, the Portsmouth Direct Line, Waterloo, Haslemere, Petersfield, Havant and Portsmouth. What would we do without it? Thank you, Emma.
Great. I noticed a question there. Are we going to save that till later? Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we'll move on. So the next theme that we're going to have a look at is time.
The second theme that we've got in the Railway First Carriage is all about time. And in this, I thought it was really important that we showcase some people throughout the whole exhibition, actually, who don't often get a platform and don't often get talked about, but they're the railway heroes and heroines that have changed the way that we live our lives today. Like Dina St Johnston here, who she was the founder of Britain's first software house called Vaughan Programming Services, which was named after her maiden name, and she introduced real-time information to British Railways in 1974. Can you imagine if you didn't know that your train was half an hour delayed? It's Dina St Johnston that we have to thank for that. We then move on then to the first railway timetable. This, for any Michael Portillo fans, is a Bradshaw. A man actually called George Bradshaw. He was a cartographer, an English cartographer. He brought together the timetables of the small network that existed in the 1830s and published this pocket-sized thing that you could keep around with you, that amalgamated them all to make the first national timetable. We've then got quite an interesting story. So this is the first commercial use of electricity in the world ever, and it involved the railways. This is an electric telegraph, obviously a recreation of it. This is an electric telegraph invented by Cook and Wheatstone, and the way it works is quite simple. So if I press this button here, you can see. So if I wanted to communicate the word time, I would turn these dials in the middle, first to T, then to I, then to M, and then to E. And there was another one of these diamond displays connected, maybe 2 miles away or something, by copper wires, and that would show a duplication of what the other person could see. So you could actually communicate with people for the first time without, shouting really loud or doing smoke signals. And that was really important for the railways. It was kind of communicating with people one letter at a time. And the influence that had then is on our time, how we tell the time across the UK. So believe it or not, in the 1830s and before that, every kind of town and village in the UK had its own way of telling the time based on where the sun was in the sky. That didn't work for the railways. There were crashes. People didn't know when they were getting the train. So by having the invention of the telegraph, what we've done is we've allowed all time to kind of be uniform. And what you could do is, what happened was in the Great Western Railway in 1840, so a year after the Cook and Wheatstone telegraph, they used London time for all of their stations going from London and going west. And so instead of having it, kind of 10 minutes before going west, everywhere used London time. And that's still the time that we use today. That's Greenwich Mean Time. It's also railway time. And that actually then led to the first day of Greenwich Mean Time, quite a while later in 1880. But 4 years after that, we had the International Meridian Conference, where 26 countries, I believe, came together, and they adopted different time zones using Greenwich Mean Time as the central. So the way that we tell the time across the world is actually thanks to the railways.
Great. Mike, was there anything you wanted to add into that?
Oh, yes, please, Emma. Two aspects, the telegraph and time. Now, the telegraph, I mentioned about the Navy being reluctant to allow the railway to break through the Portsea defences to get to Portsmouth. What they weren't reluctant to do was to use the railway's telegraph service to send messages from the Admiralty to the fleet, because the railway had provided that first direct telegraph link between the two towns, the city and the town. Well, they're both cities now, aren't they? But so that was very important. And also, it's a job to remember now, but I remember it well. The railway telephone system meant that railway stations sometimes were the only place in a village or small community that had a public telephone. So therefore, there used to be signs on the outside of railway stations, blue and white signs, I recall them, enamel signs, "You may telephone from here." And so people would come up and ask to use the GPO telephone, as it was, to contact the outside world. So that's quite important. Time, of course, as Rob was saying there, everywhere had its own time. Now, that was all very well in the stagecoach era, but as he said, when railways came, when connectivity speeded up, that had to change. And Surrey, of course, as I say, Surrey in those days started at Vauxhall Bridge, effectively. It was on London time very much. As you get further away, there was a minute or two adrift, perhaps. But the important one, as Rob mentioned, there was the Great Western Railway, because that went west. And what happened there was that the guard of the Great Western Railway train would take London time down with him all the way down to the West Country on his watch. So his watch was gospel, effectively. Now, you can still see that, interestingly, in Bristol, in Coin Street in Bristol, talking about phraseologies, where the term coining it comes from. There is still a clock with Bristol time and London time on it. And from memory, it's something like 12 minutes difference, I think. But by the time you got down to the West Country, it was 20 minutes plus. So quite important there. Thank you, Emma.
Great, thanks very much. And as we move forward now, we're going to have a look at the theme safety. So we're just going to walk. Chantal can pull it up straight away.
In the penultimate theme of the Railway First exhibition, then we look at railway safety. Now, this is the most important thing that the railways have to deal with. Trains won't run if they're not safe. But that wasn't always the case. And we start actually with the first railway death, or rather the first well-known railway death. It's often thought that William Huskisson, who died at the opening of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, was the first ever railway death. That's not true. Lots of working class people died either building the railways, or we even know that, you know, there was a boiler explosion before this. That's documented. But Huskisson's death was significant because it was at the opening of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, and it was well publicised. And it really shows, you know, the importance of railway safety. You know, it's terrible that even one person lost their life. We then move on then to Abbey Sweetwine. This is a real hero of the railways. You can see here it says first modern paramedic in Britain from 1952. In a commercial setting, we didn't use triage for the way that we deal with patients. So what Abbey Sweetwine did is at the Harrow and Wealdstone crash in 1952, she separated people into those that were injured, those that were already dead, and those that were okay. And that really helped. The number of deaths would have been a lot higher were it not for Abbey Sweetwine. And she even used her own lipstick actually to mark people who she'd given morphine to with an M on their forehead so that they didn't overdose then in hospital. Absolutely amazing person. Then there's two kind of engineering technical stories actually. So we start with from the Victorian period. We've got the first track circuit. Now this is fundamental to railway safety because if you've got one train in, well, what we do is we divide all the miles of track in the country into these things called blocks. These are fixed sections, and you can only have one train in a block at any given time. And if you do that, no trains will ever crash into each other. It's very simple. But how do you make sure that there's only one train in a block? Well, the first track circuit in 1864, what it did is you ran an electric current through the metal rails, and then that would short circuit when a train went over it, and its metal wheels made contact with the rails. And that was incredible. That meant that there's no way that you can get this wrong. So an incredible invention, and that's kind of fundamental to railway safety. And then we move forward to today, where we've got the first use of digital signalling. It was actually in Wales in 2011. But the East Coast Main Line is getting digital signalling in a £1 billion programme called the East Coast Digital Programme. It's going to move trackside signalling in cab, and drivers are going to be able to see well further forward than they can at the moment. So an incredible piece of innovation. And then we end actually with this nice little bib thing. It looks a bit like a bra. It's the first use of high vis ever in the UK was in Glasgow, and it was 15 plate layers that wore this. And obviously now it's used by school children, it's used by cyclists, it's used by construction workers, but it first started with the railways.
Mike, was there anything on safety?
Yeah, interestingly, Rob used that wonderful term plate layers, didn't he? Which I mentioned earlier. Yeah, we're still calling them plate layers. Well, they're not really plate layers. They're called track men and women these days, but we still use that term, and it goes right the way back, as I say, before railways. So can't shake it off, can we? Yeah, railway accidents. Emma mentioned at the beginning that my railway heritage goes back to 1846. And my great-great-grandfather was the guard of a Waterloo to Portsmouth train, which actually crashed at what we now call Rains Park, but in those days was just a lonely piece of Surrey Common called Epsom Junction. No stations there, no community really. It was just on the Morden Road where it crossed under the railway. And anyway, the train crashed in the dark on a January night, and my great-grandfather was a hero as the guard, and so were the driver and fireman, because they saved two other trains crashing into the wreckage in the pitch black of a January night. And what was so fascinating was that the people on all of the trains clubbed together to make a collection for my great-grandfather and his similarly heroic driver and fireman, and they collected £1,664, 68 pounds. That, and we're talking 1861 here, which is the equivalent of about £24,000 now. And as a result of it, my great-grandfather and the others were presented with ceremonial watches and heroes badges, and he wore it every day of his life. He retired as a station master, and he wore this badge very proudly every day. But what was interesting about the early railways was that passengers took this kind of thing for granted, because only one person died in this accident. And the passenger sitting next to him said, I know why he died. It was because he stood up. And he stood up to find out what was going on and got pitched out of an open window. And this chap said, I knew not to stand up because I was in the Harpenden crash of 1858. And I knew that when the train starts rocking, you have to stay seated. I thought, yes, those were the Victorians for you, but we've come a very long way since then. So, thank you, Emma.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. Now we're moving on to our penultimate theme, which is work. Just going to take our own little walk down there.
Another way that the railways have really influenced us in our lives is the way that we work, and this section is all about that. So we start then with the first known railway worker. Now what's interesting about this document is its date. It's dated 1645, a lot earlier than most people would think. And the other interesting thing about it is that it notes a woman that worked on the railways. This was a wagon gate keeper, and they would basically work like a modern level crossing. They would allow people to use the road so that the trains could go through on the railway which crossed, which is amazing. It's amazing that we have this document, a replica of it made from the Story in Durham. We then move on to the railway navvies. These are the unsung heroes that built our railways. Huge armies of people that put blood, sweat and tears into it, building thousands of miles of track, typically not using anything more than just gunpowders, picks and shovels. And we show that there were 250,000 railway navvies at the height of construction in the 1840s. And sadly, for every mile laid, 3 navvies lost their lives. It was very dangerous work. And these are the unsung heroes that we need to really talk about and celebrate, because without them we wouldn't have the railways that we've got today. Then move on then to talk about a very important woman in the railways. This was one of the first women train drivers. There were a group of them in the late 1970s. This is Karen Harrison. She is absolutely brilliant. She applied for a role to be a driver with British Rail, and she didn't use her first name. She signed the job application Kay Harrison. And when she got to the interview, the people who were interviewing her got the shock of their lives. But she persisted. She ended up becoming a train driver, and then eventually trained as well to become a human rights lawyer as well. Absolutely brilliant story, Karen. And then where we are today, actually filming this, we're in the world's first railway town. This is Shildon. And the reason it's the world's first railway town is because the population was around 115 people before the railways came, and then it grew to 8,000. Not a really significant number, not like some of the places like Crewe or York or Swindon, but Shildon was the first because it was a place that was transformed by the employment opportunities of the railways. And then this story here is one that I think we can all be thankful for. The first railway 8-hour workday took place after the First World War in 1919. It became law way later on that you can only work 48 hours in a week. And again, we've got the railways to thank for that, for doing it, way back before it was made legal.
Great. Mike, anything for that theme?
Nothing to add there. Thank you, Emma.
Great. Well, we're doing okay for time. So we finish on lifestyle.
So we're halfway through our exhibition here on the Railway First Carriage, and we're going to move on to lifestyle on this side of the wall now. So we actually start with a story that's about the first mail order business. Modern day Amazon has Price Jones to thank. He was a Welsh entrepreneur, a draper, who was based in Newtown, which is in kind of in the centre of Wales, and he established Price Jones Limited, and they were a company that made wares and then moved them by rail, and you could order them by catalogue. Famous customers included Queen Victoria and Florence Nightingale. We also have the first package holiday. This is by somebody who you will have heard of, certainly if you're British anyway, you will have heard of Thomas Cook. And Thomas Cook was actually somebody from the 1840s who he was a part of the temperance movement, where he was against alcohol, the use of alcohol. And as part of the Temperance Society, he first staged a visit to somebody speaking about the temperance movement. And from there, he decided, what a great idea, I can make this into a commercial venture. So in 1845, he took people from the Midlands to Wales and to Liverpool as well on a trip, and kind of travel as we know it completely changed from that point. We've then got the first fish and chip shop. Now, we've got two dates here. We've got 1860 and 1863, and that's because we're not food historians, we're railway historians. We don't know when the first fish and chip shop was. Some claim it was in London in 1860, some claim it was in Greater Manchester in 1863. What we do know, though, is that however they did it, both those places are inland, and they must have brought the fish by steam train. And the only reason that you can have fish and chips together nice and hot is because of the railways. We then have, so the first commuter railway, something that I'm sure, love it or hate it, I don't particularly like my commute, but the first commuter railway was in Ireland. And you've got the Dublin and Kingstown Railway, and it transported 1.2 million passengers in its first 15 months. The first FA Cup final staged at Wembley was in 1923, and it was between Bolton Wanderers and West Ham United. Bolton won 2-0, by the way, up the north. And we've got this great illustration commissioned here that shows Bolton fans, West Ham fans, but it also shows a lot of characters that we've seen throughout the exhibition. So Dina St Johnston is in here. I can't remember where she is in all honesty. You've got Hill and Adamson here as well. They're taking photographs. So this beautiful illustration was commissioned for the exhibition.
Brilliant. Mike, anything to add there?
Yes, please, Emma. Lifestyle. The railway in Surrey, a lot of it came about as a result of horse racing. When the railway first opened from Nine Elms to Woking Common, there is a wonderful, I think, perhaps apocryphal story of an Epsom race day. And the railway company, rather naughtily, probably they'd do the same in the age of the internet, sold tickets from Nine Elms to Epsom races. And what that actually meant, although I don't think anybody realised it when they bought the tickets, was that you had to walk from what is now Surbiton to the racecourse at Epsom. Well, you can't see anybody doing that in the 21st century, can you? But thousands turned up. So many people turned up that the company couldn't cope with the number of trains operating, and they had to call the peelers to restore order at Nine Elms Station. So, but that just shows how popular racing was back in Victorian time, and it continued to be so. So you'll note that the railway served. We've already mentioned Epsom, but it serves Ascot, Sandown Park, Kemptown Park, Lingfield. And also Hurst Park, which I remember from my childhood, was a race course. So in terms of lifestyle, the railway reflected the needs and interests of people as well as commuters. And of course, commuting, as Rob mentioned there, commuting is big for Surrey. I don't have to tell you that. And it also resulted in Surrey getting some of the first electric railways. It got a first electric railway from down to West Croydon from London in 1912. That was the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, but they used overhead power supply. But the South Western Railway, London and South Western Railway, had other ideas, and they started what we now know as the third rail, electrification, which is now common throughout the South, from Waterloo to Wimbledon in 1915. 1915, you'll note, was during the First World War, but that didn't stop them. They carried on electrifying the railway, even though war was on. And in fact, the railway was being bombed. And there are photographs of electric trains being stopped by bomb craters, but it didn't stop the expansion of electrification, which went great guns, if you excuse the pun, in the 1920s, expanded exponentially right the way across the South. The suburban network, and actually carried on right the way through to 1939, when the line to Chessington was opened, and that was a stop to it, because the war came, and after the war we had the passing of the Town and Country Planning Act, which created a green belt around London, which actually stopped the Chessington line reaching through to Leatherhead, which was the original plan, to join up with Leatherhead, and that never happened because of the Town and Country Planning Act. So that was an end to the expansion of the commuter railway in Surrey. But of course, electrification didn't stop, because it carried on again with the Woking to Bournemouth electrification much later in 1967. Thanks, Emma.
Great. Okay, that ends the Railway First tour. I hope you found that interesting and gave you lots of different perspectives of how the railway has influenced our lives. Chantel's going to navigate us out, and as we pass through the end of the first carriage, you can see there that you enter the second. This is our Wonderlab on wheels. If any of you or your friends or family have been to the Railway Museum up in York, they have a huge Wonderlab with many different interactives in. And what we did here was select 3 that could be most suitable to go on a travelling exhibition. And we've put the 3 in here. So if we just walk into the carriage, we're not going to pause here and play videos. We're just going to show you, because they're much more interactive, so it doesn't quite work as well. The first interactive you can see here is called Bridge Builder. You can see that there's some raised sides and a train in the middle, and then along each side are lots of yellow blocks. Those rectangular blocks are to be placed either side over the train to make bridges. So it gets children or anyone of any ages understanding how to build a bridge and what shapes and what structures work well. So that's the first interactive Bridge Builder. As you travel through, the next one you come to is called Wheels on Track. And this is all about making sure that you can understand how wheels move on tracks and what the right shapes are, so they can navigate and traverse those rails as trains do. So that you can see that there's a number of different shapes that have been created on these sort of plastic rods, different foam shapes, different sizes of circles, and that's all about making sure you understand how to make a wheel that can travel down the track, and then if you're successful, it drops down in a bucket at the end to collect. So again, learning through playing at being an engineer. As we're directed through to the final interactive, this is called Sandscape. It's a sand table, but projected onto it is a rail network through very clever cameras. And what you do is it's all about the typography of the land and how the train tracks have to be built around that. So if you gather the sand together, it will create mountains and then tunnels. And the objective is to keep the train moving around the tracks, but then by moving the land and letting water in or making mountains, you can see how the railway has to adapt to those changing conditions. But it's a really sort of immersive experience and really fascinating for anyone. Okay, so that is our 3 interactives in our Wonderlab on wheels. As we leave this carriage, we enter the 3rd carriage, which is called Your Railway Future. As I said earlier, one of the main objectives of this train is to get younger audiences excited about the railway, but more knowledgeable about the types of jobs there are on the railway, because there's so many of them, and ones that perhaps you wouldn't expect. So there's more to running a railway than just a train driver and a ticket collector. And we really wanted to open the horizons of what a career in the railway could be. So as we enter in this carriage, we focus on 10 hidden roles. They are listed as you enter into the carriage. So they are types of jobs like a freight manager. It's very going back to the origins of the railways, with their freight managers today running all of those busy services for goods, travelling them around. So that is a whole area of work there. Any railway project or team needs project managers. So there's a focus there on what it takes to be a project manager. And what we've done alongside all of these careers is list all the skills that you would need, so the children can start to identify if that's something that they think that they have that skill, and they align very much to the language and the way skills are talked about in school. So for the project manager, there's games there about balancing shapes, and that's all about sort of juggling and making sure you've got all the right ingredients to make the right teams and the right decisions. As we move through, we have a job about weather. And the weather analysts, as we know, the weather impacts the railway. So this is about teams of people that understand that and can plan for resilience. And on further down, we've got a focus on coding. This again is quite a popular interactive activity for children, using programming skills to plan a perfect journey. That's an Interlino train set, and you put little different coloured brackets into the track, which changes and tells the train what it's supposed to be doing, whether it stops, pauses, etc. And that's a great interactive way of children to start learning about programming journeys and how you do that. On the other side, one of the other jobs that you might not understand, might not realise, is a camera operator. We have these in the terms of drone pilots, or from the photograph I shared at the beginning, we have helicopters. These are teams of people that can go out and monitor the railways, particularly with drones now, focusing on making it safer. So people don't always have to do that. We've got technology that can do that as well. So you could be a camera operator. And the final few jobs we've got there, very importantly, in the community, there's lots of railway teachers go and do a lot of safety talks. That's a very important job, and one that maybe you didn't realise was there. And next to that, we've got IT apprentice. We've talked a lot about digital signalling and lots of ways in terms of technology within the railway today. So there's a huge amount of work in the IT industry, within the rail industry as well. And just behind that is the final one, and that's the ecologist. The railway moves through nature, and it's about balancing the needs of the natural environment and the railway, so it can sort of coexist together, and it can make the protecting the environment around it, from habitats to trees, etc. So that's a whole area of work as well, an ecologist. So that's how we've got the careers carriage set up, and there's a quiz there that people can take at the end to see which job matches their sort of likes and skills. And we have postcards that children can take away, so they can have that as a little memory of what job they could have on the railways. The final carriage is a split carriage, half of it's storage for the teams that work on the train, and the other half is a flexible exhibition space. We call it the partner zone. So that really allows for local organisations and groups to come in and be part of the exhibition train, but tell local stories and deliver some more interactive and engaging activity in there. So that is the train.